Um, yes, this background's killing me, man.
Hello, 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 guys. Welcome, welcome. First time that we're streaming. This is Corridor. Oh, we see? We're learning, guys. The Corridor Perspectives. And I'll let David Roberts introduce himself first.
Yes, David,
Yes,
thank
yes,
you.
David.
So yes, audience, we have David and David, David Mullings, David Roberts, so we have a double David show today. So basically, I am the chair and founder of the African Caribbean Sustainability and Investment Initiative, and David Mullings is the deputy chair, my sidekick, or 2IC, if you will, and the reason for this corridor discussion today, and we hope for a few weeks to come, is so that we can discuss issues that affect Africa and the Caribbean within the business sector. So we have created a platform that is encouraging trade between Africa and the Caribbean. We should be going live with that very shortly. So what we want to do is to have discussions on a regular basis, looking at the things that impact investors, project developers, and entrepreneurs between Africa and the Caribbean. So this today is the beginning, it's a pilot of a discussion that should bring many people who have an interest in this sector together so that we can answer questions that are pertinent to them and they can, make statements or suggestions as they see fit. So here we go. Thank you, David.
No, thank you as well, David. Right, we're David squared. One of the things I think is important, and David Roberts is now used to that. I am founder, chairman, and CEO of Blue Moho Holdings Limited. Our main vehicle is Blue Moho Capital. For those of you who know or may not know, focus on giving Caribbean diaspora access to investments in the Caribbean. We want to eventually scale that into Africa to give the Black diaspora access to investments across these various countries, originally our home countries, right? Caribbean is the sixth region. I think of us outside in terms of Africa. For me, I believe in trying. You do, and then you learn from that. We don't want to deal with analysis paralysis and saying, "Hey, we want to create this amazing show." Start, get information to people, learn, iterate, right? Through startup. So that's why we're doing this way. I told David, hey, let's get one going before we go and do any more. You do the first one, you're going to learn from it. So the idea is that we're going to ask some questions, right? Especially David, and we want to share our perspectives on why South Corporation, we're talking about Africa and the Caribbean building bridges, and why it makes sense to invest in these markets. And so I look forward to having this discussion and then making it a regular discussion that you guys can check in. We'll start diving into specific examples. We want to do case studies. We want to go into specific industries, specific countries. So, David, back over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for putting it in context, David. Great. So, we've been talking a lot over the past few weeks, even before, you became the deputy chair, that there seems to be an important idea about the economics that exist between Africa and the Caribbean. So, why do you think that now is a good time for the corridor to be established?
Wait, so I think you would. I want to hear you first. I think of you as bringing from the African side, especially with your base in the UK, and then I bring my side. I've been extremely public about why emerging markets in general are a good bet, and then I want to focus on the ones I know and understand. For me, that's Caribbean. I think there's similarities with Africa, but you also will know some things on the African side, and we can see where we see similarities. So
Yeah.
what made you even start ACSII? Why did you think that there was an opportunity there? I think that helps people to say why. I think your why of Africa Caribbean then answers that question, and I will add on my piece.
All right, fantastic. Somehow I feel as if I should be wearing the African outfit and you wear this Caribbean sunshiny outfit,
Yeah, well, I like that we can mix it up, though, right? Exactly. We embracing the opposite of yeah. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we set up AXI just under 2 years ago, out of a need to get African and Caribbean entrepreneurs to work together. I mean, for hundreds of years, we've been separated for all kinds of reasons that make no sense, right? But not least the fact that we have trade opportunities that exist in Africa and the Caribbean that haven't been exploited. They haven't been exploited over the years. So we felt that because of our network of having active and live investors looking for opportunities to put money into projects that have been proven to be viable, with no structure, that ACSII could be that structure. ACSII could be that conduit to let the tried and tested investors meet with project developers that have been de-risked in the sense that we've done our due diligence on them, so that there is a viable mix of business opportunity. So that's essentially why we set this up. So we're helping entrepreneurs on both sides of the Atlantic access finance and develop projects that deliver value. And I know you're big on this in terms of creating value for markets. That's the ethos of what we do.
Now, I love that. And I think that's important that we get that wire across, because more people are going to agree. So we're getting some thumbs up right here from viewers. And viewers, we will open it up for some questions. Don't feel that you can't share questions. If you want, you can type them in the chat. We will eventually get to the questions while we go through this intro part. In my case, I will build on that. I do think that opportunities right now. We have to look at where the growth is going to come from. Investors chase yield. Yield comes from where growth is. So if you look at economic growth has stalled in most of the OECD countries. So you're looking at the US, Canada, UK, Europe, because they have an aging population. So if you have an aging population, they've had low GDP growth. These are already massive countries. So 1%, 2, 3% GDP growth. Where's yield? Where's the GDP growth 5% and higher? Guess what? It's in emerging markets. Where's the next 2 billion plus people going to be born? It's in emerging markets. Where do you have a large and growing population, right? We've seen population shrink in Japan, UK, Europe, Canada, and US will be next. So you need to look for three things to get you excited about investing in a region, in a country, and industry, as Michael Leach, my sponsor, would say. And those three things I see as being very clear in Africa and in the Caribbean. And number one, you want to invest in a place where inefficiencies are present. I cannot make money in a perfectly efficient environment. And we know emerging markets have massive inefficiencies. Any of us who've been to Africa or read about it, or the Caribbean, we know that there are inefficiencies. So we can come in and help to make something more efficient. So there's a huge opportunity there, an inefficiency opportunity. The second one that you want to look for is a place where there's a lack of equity capital flowing in. Right? We have a lot of debt capital that's been flowing into Africa and the Caribbean, mainly emerging markets in general. Everybody's lending you money and charging a fixed interest rate. What we need is equity capital to go in. But when you don't have a lot of competition, it means, number one, the cost for you to buy in is lower. Right? We don't have the valuations like we have in America, where it's 10 times earnings and 14 times EBITDA. We get to have smaller entry points, so lower price point to get in. It's not because the companies are less valuable. There's less competition, supply and demand. So there's less demand for the investments in those businesses. But then secondly, when you think about that as well, guess what? It means that when you bring equity capital to the table, it's hugged and loved and treated differently. It's better. They don't get that much equity capital, so they will treat your money better than any other money that they get. They can borrow from anybody. They can't get equity capital from just anyone. So those are two of the three things that are really important to get you excited to invest in those regions. I'll get to the third one in a bit and make sure that we know that. But at least those two things are clearly present. Some other things that we have to think about, though, whether it's Caribbean or Africa, is you want young. So I said large and growing population, and I thought about two things that get you excited. But it needs to be young, needs to be developing, right? You think about India 25 years ago, or the four Asian tigers in the 60s and 70s. They need to be developing. So you're talking about roads, ports, electricity. So infrastructure needs to have development taking place. You need to see domestic-driven investment. It can't just be foreigners invested. If you only depend on foreign direct investment, it means that when the foreigners have fear, right? A hurricane is coming, or there's some sort of political unrest, something happened, you know what? They take the money and run. And that's what we saw with the Asian financial crisis. So you want some local investment, domestic-driven growth. You want to see an export opportunity. It can't be just countries that import and stuff. We need to see that there's an export opportunity. Nowadays, thankfully, it's not just about raw materials and mining. We can do finished goods, and we can also export services. Technology has, the world is flat. Technology has made the world flat. So we see export opportunity. The Caribbean is a great opportunity for export, and Africa is even bigger in terms of building stuff and exporting their services or goods. It needs to be capital friendly. Africa has become more capital friendly. The Caribbean was already capital friendly. We are well known for offshore financial services in key islands. People know us, trust us. So capital friendly. I think Africa is now getting there even better. We want to see prudent leverage. So this is the people, low household debt. We never had a ton of credit cards in Africa and the Caribbean. So we have low household debt. That means they have more capital to deploy as the middle class is growing. And ideally, you want the countries to start having low debt, so prudent leverage. So we want to capitalize on those select trends. I'll get into specific trends that I see, but those are the reasons why I think you have to look at emerging markets. We are focused on Africa and the Caribbean, and we need to be working together. We can't just depend on outside investors to come in as well.
It's quite instructive that you mentioned the whole issue of, us working together as a people. For centuries, Europe has underdeveloped Africa, and as a consequence, the Caribbean has suffered for that as well. And I'm like the fact that you put, the whole monetary issue in context as to where the capital is flowing from. But one of the things that I'm a little concerned about is the Caribbean's receptiveness to money coming out of Africa. I'm not sure if you have any insight as to how it is that can be. Um, are you there, David?
Yeah, I'm here. I was giving you the stage to go and talk about this cycle. So I'm going to give
Oh,
you the stage, and you're
yeah,
going to share exactly your perspective on that. Then I'm going to come back. I want to zoom in on
yeah,
this because this topic is too important. So I'm giving you the center stage, sir.
absolutely. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to get from you a sense of how it is the Caribbean could be more receptive to diaspora funds coming out of either Africa itself or from people within the diaspora with all over Europe, Caribbean people living in places other than their home countries. How do you think that we can be more receptive to that, and how can we deploy that money within our markets?
I love that question because you set up the third thing that should get you excited about investing in a region, a country, and industry. And that is that perception must be different from reality. Our perception of Africa has been shaped not by reality. It's not been shaped by us visiting there, by us meeting Africans. It's been shaped by media, mainly Western media. And we have to change that perception. So, in order to get the Caribbean to actually do business more with the global South, we have to get them to not think of Nigerians as scammers, to not think Ethiopia is full of famine. Right? That's the perception.
Yeah,
We have
yeah,
met people, all of us as Black people from the Caribbean or from Africa, have met people who ask us if we have running water, if we have electricity. Oh, I didn't know you had that. And we look at them shocked. Like, wait, you don't travel? You don't read? You don't use Google? But then we have to confront our own biases. How many of us can talk about parts of South Africa other than Soweto? Right? We can all talk about the worst things. We can talk about Rwanda and what happened there. How many of us can talk about what happened since? And so we first have to educate ourselves. So as Marcus Garvey would say, we have to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. So we have been mentally enslaved. We've been sold this vision and this version of Africa. And let's be honest, the Caribbean is extremely close to the United States. So we have gotten US media. And in fact, we've gotten BBC media as well, which is ultimately propaganda. So we have to tell our own stories. We need to change the way we see ourselves and the way we see these other Black countries. I think that's where it starts. So if you're going to get Jamaica and Ghana to work together, or get Barbados and Nigeria to work together, or Botswana and Bahamas, guess what? We actually need to visit. We need to visit there. We need to meet with people from there. We need to speak to people who are doing business. We need to experience those cultures, and we're going to be surprised how many similarities we actually have.
Yeah, you're right. I think there are more similarities than there are differences between Africa and the Caribbean. And I like the fact that, I hope I didn't, interrupt your flow too abruptly, but I like the fact that you mentioned education being key to this corridor being successful. Because if we don't understand the African culture, and Africa has a plethora of cultures, thousands of them, and people seem to think that Africa is a country. Africa is not a country. So all of these things people need to understand if they are to effectively make a move into that corridor. So yeah, go ahead. I just had to say that.
Yeah, man, no, you have to say it, and I agree. And I'm looking for a graphic again to put up that actually shows Africa in comparison to all these other countries, because as we know, the Mercator projection of the globe is not accurate. It makes sense when you take a sphere and you need to flatten it. But that has given this perspective that Africa is small as a continent
Smaller.
versus Russia, for example, or Eastern Europe. So we again need to learn. We need to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. So we need to be educated, which then changes our perception of the Caribbean, of Africa, which then allows us to recognize the reality to then go and invest there. Until you believe that it is investable, you're not going to invest there. Right? If the first reaction you are going to get when you say to a fellow black person, hey, I'm looking at doing some business in Nigeria, I'm looking at doing some business in Jamaica, business in Botswana, business in Barbados. If the first thing they say, boy, I don't know if I can trust them, that's a problem. You now have a 7-foot hurdle to jump over, as Warren Buffett would say, not a 1-foot hurdle to step over. I want to make it as easy as possible. That means you have to educate people. And that is going to be core. And that's why this corridor, set of discussions, corridor perspectives are important. And we're going to need to bring on some other guests. We might need to show some videos. But that's also why it's important that we travel there. Right? I know you have an event coming up where people are going to be asked, travel to Barbados. Come on a trip, essentially as a fact-finding trip to business, meet with people who are doing business there, see the opportunities there, understand where we are already connected. And then we go from there. And so I think those missions are going to be critical. And those who can't come on the mission, we need to then provide perspectives for those who did come. And then you provide, here's the videos and the interviews. Say, here's what I got from this trip. Here's what I didn't realize was happening here. And that's what I love when I get to tell people about what's happening in different Caribbean countries. Oh my gosh, I didn't know this. I was like, exactly. Because most people aren't going out of their way to learn. They just consume content. They're on social media scrolling. The news comes at them and they just absorb and they don't fact check, they don't double check. We need to make sure we, who know better, help to educate those so it can change the way we see ourselves and the way the world sees us.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And the thing that I think people need to understand too is that we are constantly bombarded by Western media about how things are. Their reality, they're inputting or imposing on us every day. So if we are not strong within ourselves as a people, understanding where we're from originally, I have very strong Guyanese roots. I have very strong Grenadian roots because my parents are from both Guyana and Grenada. And I have a sense of who I am as an individual. So a lot of the stuff that I hear, and some people might find this strange, I don't listen to the BBC. I've been a practicing journalist for 30 years in the Caribbean. And I have come and I've lived in the UK for so long, and I've realized that, you know what, there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation coming
Mm-hmm.
from these established media houses. So you know what I spend most of my time listening to these days? You might find it strange. Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera. Every day, all day. Because I need that kind of grounded journalism,
Yeah, you need
away from
balance.
the
That's what I
propaganda.
would. You need balance. We can't only listen to one thing that has a bias, a only Western media bias or this lens. You need to have balance reporting. And I remember there's a underground news actually does that, right? They go on there, they give you the same news story, and they can tell you the leading of all the different ones, so you can see how it's being reported in different places and around the world. And for me, that has been very useful. One side, right? We have to remember people experience things, they believe things, their values come from their own perspective and lived experience. So there's an angle. It's not that you're trying to be biased, it's that you were raised biased. It's like a Christian person versus a Jewish person versus a Muslim person talking about Muhammad or talking about Jesus. Actually, let's say that one, Jesus. I could talk to three very nice people who treat everyone well, but they come from their own perspective on what they think about the person Jesus, right? And then if you're not a believer, guess what? You have another perspective. We're not saying that that's a bad thing. We're just saying recognize that you are coming at it from your side. Bias is not a bad word. Bias is just a description. And
Yeah.
so it's important that we counter the negative stereotypes, the negative narratives about Africa, about the Caribbean, but also how about we ensure that they don't have to make these stereotypes anymore and they won't believe them? How about that? Do things that they go and say, no, man, that's not true. If they say that the Caribbean is inefficient or they say that the African countries are inefficient, we have to stop and say, is there some truth to it? Why are they saying that? If you say customer service is horrible, why are they saying that? Because sometimes there is a little truth. And we also need to confront that. And I know some people find it painful. They feel like, boy, you hurt me, man. Why? Guys, stop, pause. Was there any truth in what they said? Okay, great. I don't like the way they said it. And they may have overblown it, but let's make sure they can never say it again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to try to put up this graphic. So see, guys, we're learning, we're testing. I'm going to try to put up this graphic of Africa. Look how big Africa is.
Yeah.
Look how big Africa is. Most of us were never taught that this is how big Africa is compared to all the other countries, continents in some cases. That is, to me, the definition of the land of opportunity.
Yeah.
That
And
is
that
what that
will
looks.
help us to change our perspective of ourselves and our value.
Yeah,
Definitely. You know.
Africa is valuable. Otherwise, nobody would have gone there as colonizers.
Yeah, and they went there and told the world that they discovered us. How could you
Yeah.
discover a people
They,
that was
they,
there
they,
already?
they went to Africa, they went to the Caribbean, they went to India, right? They have gone there because there was value there. Then they came back with the media and said, no, man, no, man, no, man, nothing valuable there because they wanted to keep us away
And they
from
keep
participating in that. And in fact, they tried to keep us down from, no, we just want to mine the stuff. We will make all the money. But you go and grow the cocoa or you grow the sugar cane, right? So we also need to ensure that we're moving up the value chain. So when I talk about select trends, I want to identify some trends that I believe exist now in South-South opportunity. And you can add on to any of these or tell me which ones you agree with. But number one, one of the trends I like that I'm seeing is industrialization. We're seeing massive growth in infrastructure and heavy industry sectors. Right? Everybody obviously knows about Dangote and his refinery. That's a big one in Nigeria. But we're seeing industrialization. So I love seeing that. We have a power cost problem, though, and so we need to deal with the energy cost. But that also requires infrastructure and heavy industries. We're seeing increased urbanization. There's no question. As a middle class grows, as a country gets richer, people move towards cities, which means you need to have your towns grow into more cities. But we see an increased urbanization. That means home builders, retail chains, there's more that's going to stand to benefit from them. So that's a great opportunity to invest. But we need to do it better. Right? Urban sprawl in the United States versus the way Europe has developed, versus the way Singapore has developed. Right? We're talking about green space. You look at Colombia as a great example. So we need to have urbanization that's climate resilient and green, not just concrete everywhere. Increase per capita income. As people start to earn more money, the internet is part of that. Guess what? It drives demand for consumer goods. They're going to buy cars, TVs, internet, clothes. They're spending on some food products that are local, maybe some that are foreign. There's an opportunity there. And we see in education, people want to be more educated. Well, that's going to be a big investment opportunity as well. And companies benefit from that. We see development of neighboring emerging markets. A rising tide lifts all boats, unless you don't have a boat, and then you drown. So rising tide has been lifting a lot of emerging markets. So you see China, we see Vietnam coming after that. So if you think about that, well, Africa has all of these opportunities, Botswana, and then you can look beside that. In the Caribbean, you see Barbados and Trinidad, Bahamas, now Guyana. You can see Jamaica is also benefiting from that, and some of the small islands, St. Lucia and so on, Grenada, as you say. And then scalability. Africa certainly is more scalable. The Caribbean has some fragmentation issues, but it's also hard to travel in between. Africa is weird, right? Africa is actually a contiguous continent. The Caribbean is not. But they both have the same air travel problems of actually going to each other. So we have to solve those problems
Yeah,
from
the
a people.
connectivity. Yeah.
Yeah, connectivity is a problem, but things are scalable. They can launch something in a country right now, it's digital, or it might be a product and you can sell it somewhere else now, thanks to the internet. So scalability is a huge opportunity. And then lastly for me is the democratization of wealth. Most of the last businesses in the Caribbean, in Africa, same way it used to be in India, they were typically owned by the government or a few wealthy families or some outside foreigners. That was it. It's really those three own the biggest things. What we started to see is more governments are privatizing things. Right? Some in some cases they never ran it well, but they're privatizing these companies. You're seeing family-owned businesses choosing to list on public stock exchanges. Right? Whether this is a Jamaica stock exchange, the best performing stock exchange in the whole world for 5 years up to 2019, according to Bloomberg. Or you look at Rwanda, whose exchange that Jamaica actually worked with them. Jamaica Stock Exchange did some work with them for them to upgrade. We have Nigeria. Dangote is planning to try and list something across Africa on the stock exchanges. So once again, wealthy families are listing their companies. And then lastly, some of the foreign companies are starting to list pieces of their own companies on local exchanges as well, maybe even list onto overseas exchanges and give more of the African and Caribbean diaspora a piece of that. So democratization of wealth is another trend that I think we need to be capitalizing on.
Yeah, it's good that you've put it all in perspective in terms of, where the growth areas are for the Caribbean and Africa to some degree. But I want to go back to something that you said earlier about how it is that we could effect change um, more efficiently. And it's the fact that you use the we word.
Yeah,
Yes, we as leaders are the ones who have to lead the charge in making this change that we want to see. And I come across situations on a weekly basis where, look, today I had a meeting with some people. We want to connect a part of the corridor, the Nigeria CARICOM corridor, um, to the market. And it was brought up, which was a very important aspect of the conversation about where does AI play a role in that process. And it was made clear that you can't really use AI in as much as it's a very useful instrument or tool to help us get answers to things that we might not want to readily just think of ourselves. But this woman on the call, she said, look, and she was in Jamaica, she said, we are producing at a rate that we're not able uh, to share with the world as yet. So I said, well, why don't you use AI? She says, no, we can't use AI yet because the technology on the ground in Jamaica is such that you have to, you have to work in a way that gives you the opportunity to bring the information later than in real time. So she's basically saying that, all right, yeah, they're doing this stuff now, they're doing the research and whatnot, but the time it takes to compile that data and upload it to the system is behind the curve. So, we have to be realistic in terms of how we think education and modern technology and how the digital age can help this transition, you know. So that is why I think that, we as leaders, we need to be able to, one, be aware of our own biases, because I have them, you obviously have yours. And we need to use those biases to engender positive relations with the people that we're trading with in Africa. Because I've had situations where people have misunderstood my intention, I've misunderstood their intentions because the culture does not blend, and we sometimes don't give ourselves time to understand. I know this is a fundamental thing that some people might think not important, but it is important. And I see you laughing, David. It is important because if my culture doesn't understand your culture, we can't do business.
we can. We can. And that's why, to me, I laugh in because I've read so much about doing business in China, doing business in Japan, and I think you have to focus on culture first, right? I need to break bread with you, get to know you, understand the do's and don'ts before I try and do business. And I don't think enough of us approach it as if we were playing a game. And I did a video recently. I did a morning walk one of my famous morning walks. And I was pointing out that a lot of people decide they want to become entrepreneurs. They're going to get into business. That's what they're doing. They're going to play the game of business. But they didn't read the rules. They didn't watch anybody play. They didn't speak to anybody who has played it to ask for advice how to play the game. Rules and strategy are two different things. So if you are going to play Monopoly or you're going to play basketball for the first time, you don't just run out and start playing. To me, that's not smart. What you want to do is do some research first. Read the rules. Go and check out some strategies. Watch some people play it a few times. Ask somebody for advice who has been playing it. And then you can now go in there more prepared, right? Preparation, to me, as someone who played football in Jamaica in the second and third division, preparation is the most important thing. And I don't see us doing that to go on the business in these countries. That's why it's so important, in my opinion, that you want to do business in the Caribbean, you come to Barbados on the mission. You're going to come to Jamaica. You want to do business in Ghana, you're going to go to Ghana first. But you're going to research first what are the customs and so on. I remember I did a meeting years ago in Miami. Now a good friend of mine from Dubai. And I'm going to send his video. And I never forgot. It's the first time I'm meeting anyone from the Middle East. The first time I'm going to try and do business. And they selected the restaurant that we're going to meet. So this is in Miami on South Beach. So of course the restaurant is going to have all sorts of food and alcohol. And I made sure to speak with someone before that. What am I allowed to order or not order with the person there? I said, okay, well, he's not a super strict Muslim, but you don't order alcohol unless they order alcohol. Said, okay, great. We sit down. The man put in his order for alcohol, and we said, oh, all right, good. No, we're good. But I asked first. I didn't want to risk offending them or doing something that would have been an issue. And we never discussed business on that first meeting. We just got to know each other. We learned about each other's families, backgrounds, parents, what got them into what they're doing. The next meeting is now when we started talking business. And I think it's very important to prepare ahead of time, do that research, and learn about those cultures, right? Don't think that Ghana is one culture either. Don't think Nigeria is one culture. I know in the Caribbean, we certainly tend to think of the islands as separate cultures. Jamaica is all the same, which is actually not entirely true, but it's nothing like what I have read about in Africa. You have more experience because we have tribes, we have multiple languages. We don't have exactly the same thing in the Caribbean. Is probably 100 times more complicated. You can fill in more on that.
Yeah, you're right. And there's also another thing that we need to take into account when we try to do business across borders. And it's a concept called power distance. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but I can just give you a summary of how this thing works. Many years ago, well, actually, just to define what power distance means, it's a perception someone has about their position in relation to the person they're speaking with, right? So if you're in company with a CEO of a company, and you might be a lowly, sorry for using the term lowly, but you're a junior manager, you you have a perception of where you are in relation to that senior person. And they've had examples, particularly in China over the years, where you have a first officer and the captain flying the plane. The captain is obviously the senior person on the flight, but the first officer, who is young and inexperienced, might realize the captain is doing something wrong and will be afraid to challenge him or her. So what they do, ultimately, they don't tell them that they should be I don't know, taking the autopilot off because they're heading for a mountain. They will just sit there and the plane will crash. Power distance. So that exists, and there are varying levels of power distance as you go across global cultures. This plays a very important role in Africa. And I've experienced it in my own team, where you've got members on your team who would not challenge you if you make a mistake, or if you speak out of turn, because they don't think that they have the right to challenge you.
My generation don't believe in that. I'm a millennial. We don't believe in turns.
You see, it's a serious thing, and it causes businesses to rise or fall, right?
So we get some comments over here, and I love that, boss. Let me see what this one said. We have, so Michelle just said, very wise consideration about culture that comes from our Christian upbringing. And right now, assume, Michelle, that everybody has a Christian upbringing, or everybody's Christian either. So you have to keep that in mind in culture as well. And so I see this one here, it's a longer one. This is Dr. Kerry and Pierre. Look at this, David. You see how first time we're doing this now? We're having first time. What? I was going to say long time listener, first time caller. Well, it's first time listener, first time messages. So thank you, Michelle. Now we have Dr. Pierre. So glad to hear about operating from the stance of culture first. Make it an intentional aspect of business. Engage and learn about cultural nuances and value those aspects first before jumping into business. Just so thank you for raising that.
Absolutely.
Cultural. Yeah, man. And I'm going to hammer that. So I don't think we pay attention enough, especially when we are more now based in OECD countries, right? I'm more in the US, you're in the UK. I grew up in Jamaica, I worked in business in Jamaica, but I'm over here. There are some things that are just different over here. And then when I go back, I do expect us to do certain things. Like if you're inviting me to lunch, one, you're going to care what I eat. Am I allergic to anything? Do I like that? Jamaicans don't seem to care. They just feel they must eat everything, kind of thing, right? Yeah, I never forgot. I got.
Guyanese are the same thing. Guyanese are the same, man. I'm telling you, David.
I don't forget. A friend of mine is a investment banking guy in Jamaica, runs his own firm, and invited me to lunch. This is years ago, and to this day he brings it up. I'm going to say his first name, Marcus. I won't say his last name. Invite me to the same room. We have
Marcus Garvey's son.
Yeah, I want to catch up. I want to talk some more. See the stuff I do in the papers. I must come to lunch with him in New Kingston. Like, yeah, man, no problem. So I'm here now waiting for a calendar invite to get sent for me to accept. He's going to tell me where lunch is, but he never even asked me what I want to eat. I said, okay. So an hour before lunchtime, come and say, oh, am I coming by the office? I said, okay, I could come by the office, but where are we eating lunch? The man said, no, we eating lunch at my office. Everybody who know me know I eat lunch at office. I order a bunch of food on Friday. And I said, okay, I guess I could do the office. But you didn't ask me what kind of food I would want to eat for lunch. And I said, what do you mean? I order in Jamaican food. I was like, okay, which food you order? No, just there was this assumption that I am going to eat everything that is, oh, yeah, man, curry goat and jerk chicken and this and oxtail. And I was like, I never tell you I eat all of that. Though. And you know what his response was? You become too Americanized. And I said, that's actually not true. From us at home in Jamaica, that's how it was. That's how mom was with me. Don't make that assumption. So I think we can make assumptions before we ask, but we also have to remember culture is like, boy, they don't normally do that. So let us be more specific. Hey, I'd love to do lunch with you. My preference is Italian or Chinese, or let's go get some Jamaican food, kind of thing. So, or if we're ordering in, I would like to see the menu. I don't want you to order for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I say Diane registered, Dr. Diane registered, big up, big up. We got some more UK people in the house saying good afternoon. All culture first, right? We hit the nail on the head with this one. I think culture is the big one. Culture is, I think that's a starting point. But that also allows us to understand each other better and emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. As we learn more about the culture of each of these groups that we want to interact with, we get to see them differently. We change our perceptions about these people.
Yep, and it creates an enabling environment to do business. You take away the preconceived ideas and notions you have about a culture, because half the time some of those things are fabricated, fabricated through the influence of the media. So you have to do your homework. You must do your homework, and that's what a lot of our politicians tend to not pay enough attention to. I'm sorry. It's a fact.
No. I laugh because we're on the same page. I agree, right? So I have an MBA in marketing and international business. So I care a lot about marketing, about storytelling, about brand perception. It matters to me. I feel that the majority of people in this world do not think hard enough about branding and marketing and storytelling. They think that if I come up with the best product, people are going to find me. And that's not how it works. You need to have good marketing, and you also need to have good distribution. Because I can market it amazingly. People can't get it, it don't matter. So we need to ensure that we tell our own stories. So when you have a promotions corporation for one of these Caribbean countries or one of these African countries, what content are they putting out? Notice I use the word content. What content are they putting out? It's not just press releases anymore and showing up in the newspaper. What content are you producing to tell the story you want to tell to change perceptions of the world. Because a lot of us want to say, no, man, my country are going with things now. This happening. Okay, did anybody know this is happening? Where you told them? How they found out about it? Oh, it's just on your YouTube channel? You think then going to your YouTube channel? I look at some of these promotion corporations and their Instagram followers are looking at the number of people that actually views on the video, are looking at their YouTube channel. I was like, man, you have 130 views on the video. How you think that going to get anybody to invest in agriculture? Who you reaching? You need to bring in marketing experts to come and help you get the message out. We ignore the importance of marketing too much. And then PR is after that. You need to get the right public relations, which is working the journalists and so on. And then you want to tap what I consider groups, affinity groups. Of course, ACSII is one of those. If you want to get people to invest in Africa or the Caribbean, you should be coming to ACSII. We have a mailing list, we have events, we can do more of these. Let us help you understand what questions people are asking, where they are, and then help you get the right information into the right hands at the right time.
Yep, it's all about positioning. All about positioning, and one of the crazy things is, I mean, I know we've got all these comments coming through, but I've looked at people sending me briefs for investment, and when you look, you don't see there's no line item for marketing.
For marketing.
You want $3.5 million from these people, and you can't tell them how you're gonna put the thing in front of people?
I love asking people, what's your go-to market strategy? So I've seen Carol here. Carol is part of the executive for the University of Miami Black Alumni Association. So big up, thank you. This is someone who went to the University of Miami with me. We were there together undergrad. So Carol says, culture starts with a micro lens. Unfortunately, the pace of business often promotes macro views for the sake of efficiency. And that is so true. And that is why I'm going to give you the quick story then. This one, I love this one. Somebody was telling me this. It was an Asian person actually was telling me the story, and I was laughing because I was talking about the Caribbean and inefficiency and the fact that soon come, that is our thing, right? The only thing Jamaicans do fast is run on the track. The only thing Jamaicans do fast is run on the track. The Jamaica Stock Exchange has a running joke that the only thing that starts on time in Jamaica and finishes on time is the stock exchange. And I was like, wow, that's wild. But you know what we feel? It's kind of true. So this person, this Asian guy that I met at a single family office event, when I said that at stage and I came off and he said, it's so interesting to point that out. I'm going to give you a counterpoint though. And he says he met a wealthy white American one time who was very much focused on laid back, soon come Caribbean attitude, which is actually a developing country attitude. This is not just the Caribbean. Anybody who grew up near the beach could tell you that kind of vibe though. And so what he said is that the American was saying, oh man, I was in America and I had this big fishing company and I retired. I moved to Jamaica. Of course, I don't know if it's true. I moved to Jamaica and I'm living out in Treasure Beach. So Treasure Beach is St. Elizabeth, famous fishers and all these things. And he sees this fisherman who goes out in the morning at 5 a.m., comes back by 9 a.m. with his fish, put it down and then finish work for the day. The man just hanging out, chilling in the community, hanging out with his kids and so on. And so he goes to talk to the fisherman after the week and said, wow, you're really good at fishing. Every day you go out, you come back with stuff, you sell some, make money, you have stuff to eat with the family, you can even share with some other people and give. I think you're an amazing fisherman. I would like to invest in your company and help you to scale it. And the fisherman said, okay, and then what? And the guy said, well, and then we're going to scale it to another country. I said, okay, and then what? And say, well, then we can take it public and make a whole heap of money. And the man say, and then what? And say, well, then you're going to retire from the business and relax on the beach every day. You're going to retire. And the fisherman said, but I already do that right now. Right? So many of us have been programmed hustle, and then at 65 retire to then go and enjoy life. Versus this fisherman recognized that it's important to live your life, take time, slow down. It's not about staying on this treadmill, right? Which has become a cultural thing. So we culturally say soon come, we take our time. The United States in particular doesn't understand taking time, and at least in Europe, they actually have vacations, paid parental leave, and so on. Here in the US, 2 weeks vacation, at most a few sick days. So we have become this hyper-capitalist country in the US, and we're trying to infect. I'm using the word infect on purpose. We're trying to infect everybody else with that thinking. Versus, I think that emerging market culture say, "Oh, slow down, enjoy life." We want efficiency. We do want efficiency, but back to Carol's point, we need to also ensure the pace is sustainable. It makes sense. We're not going to run ourselves into the ground. You have to ask yourself, then what?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point of view. I do agree, but I think the reality on the ground is what determines, what pace we use. I've always believed in the old adage, the situation is boss. And a lot of us, even though we want to expect the best out of an encounter, particularly a business encounter, our financial circumstances determine how fast we push the negotiation. you know
Hey,
but,
I used to be the guy. So okay, I can tell you this one. So I used to call myself a parallel entrepreneur. Right? We have people who are talking about, what's your Antoine, or big up Antoine in Palm Beach saying, I remember hearing the fisherman story years ago. Great story. So the idea is, no, no, forget what I was about to say. Oh, Lord, thank you for that, though, Antoine. I appreciate you jumping on. David, what was I just saying?
but you were about to make the point. You didn't make the point yet.
Oh,
And it was on,
what was triggering the point?
yeah, it was on the back of my saying that the situation is boss.
Oh, right. So as I thought of myself as a parallel entrepreneur, because
Yeah,
there are always serial entrepreneurs, one company at a time, right? You're building blocks. I thought that when I can be a serial entrepreneur, I can do multiple things at once, provided I get the right people in place. I don't want to just do one thing. And that blow up in my face. Because what would happen is that we get some money, but then I spread it too thin across too many things. I said yes
yeah,
to too many things. I thought the idea was when opportunity is brought to you, you say yes and find a way to make it. Because I'm this Richard Branson guy. I'm his
that's
disciple.
right.
And
So am
Richard
I.
Branson say yes and find a way. And you know what? It run me into the ground and put me in the hospital and lose the money. When I
Right.
go back and look at what Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger says, I said, take a book, write down all the things you want to accomplish in your life, even 20 of them. Pick the first two, turn the page and focus. You need to get one thing going well, systems and processes in place, throwing off cash. Then you can pay for the next thing. And then my friend Mike McAlowitz goes and writes his book called The Pumpkin Plan. And it tells his story, right? Mike decides after doing his business, writes his first book, The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur. I do one of the blurbs on the back. Donny Deutsch from CNBC, The Big Idea, is also on that blurb with me. And Mike goes on now, does the second book, The Pumpkin Plan. He wanted to understand how did these American pumpkin farmers create giant pumpkins? How you grow a giant pumpkin that win these contests? Is it that they got special seeds? Is it special soil? Is it special fertilizer? How? Turns out it's none of that. Nothing to do with the soil, nothing to do with the seeds, nothing to do with the fertilizer. They all get the same seeds. What were they doing? When you go and talk to them, the guy say, we start, we plant all the seeds. So call it, we plant 100 seeds. We water it, we take care of it, and then in a few weeks, the vines start growing, and then the little pumpkins start showing up. And then after a week, you want to look at those vines and say, which ones have bigger pumpkin? It means that those vines are pushing better nutrients, or it's better absorbing the nutrients. So you know what they do? They cut the vines to some of the smaller ones, and they leave, say, 20 or so. And then they come back a few weeks later and you say, which ones out of those 20 are growing even faster? Say, okay, cut the vines to most of them and leave 5. And you come back later and you only have 2 that are bigger than the rest of them. You say, cut the rest of the vines and only focus on those 2 pumpkins and let them grow. The idea is that we tend to spread ourselves too thin and we say yes to too much, and then we try to fertilize everything and take care of everything. But not everything absorbs all the nutrients the way that some of them do. So the idea is that we don't throw everything against the wall, see what sticks, and then feed everything. If what sticks and what can grow better, feed that. And there's a Pareto principle that we know, 80-20 rule.
20.
80% of the result come from 20% of our efforts, but most of us not tracking which efforts lead into which results. So I'm the guy that sits down every month and every quarter look at what did I want to accomplish, objectives and key results, OKRs. What did I want to accomplish this quarter? Okay, what did I do and what helped me to accomplish the goals or as close to the goals as possible. What did I do that didn't help me? Okay, why was my calendar so full of the stuff that didn't help me? And then I need to update the calendar and go. I might have to go back to Zambia and say, I'm so sorry. I overcommitted. I don't have the bandwidth to help you with this thing. And internally, it's not feeding what I really needed to feed. And you have to just tell them quickly, I'm sorry, I overcommitted. So my default now is no. You come to me with something? No. If you keep pressing me and I run it through my framework that this is a good opportunity and a good time with good people, those three things matter to me. Good opportunity, good time, and good people. If you want me to do it and it's not on my timeline, you write the check.
Right. You had
You write the
5
check then.
seconds to make that point, David.
Yeah.
5 seconds. Yep, but you're right. You're absolutely right. It's all about how you organize your thinking, how you organize your situation, and having a good PA or EA for that matter. They always help because we think that we're invincible. We can do
Oh
everything.
gosh,
You know.
you do. But self-discipline. Self-discipline. Right? I have a framework. Self-discipline. So we said yes to this. It's been 1 hour almost. We're committed to the hour. It's 51 minutes, 50 seconds. Fine. We have a little more time. But just so people understand, and those who join late, David invited me to speak at his conference last November in London. My first trip as an adult to the UK. My brother came with me. Spoke at the event that ACSII was doing. I was really impressed with the event and decided I'm willing to support this. I see somebody who looked like me doing something that I agree with. I know I can help. So I've said yes. Right? I bite off something. I bet I can chew it. So I just join the board and support what you're doing. And then it turns around and an opportunity presents itself for me to come in a more leadership role as deputy chairman. I didn't have to decide, wow, I don't want to overcome it. I do think it's good people. That's you, David, and your team. I think it's perfect timing. It's not just good timing, right? And of course, this is a good idea. I think it's a great idea. It's a necessary idea. So I had to resign from something else. I took away myself from a board to free up time for this. And then, you know how we end up on this live stream, guys? David and I are talking about things that we can do. And I said, we need to change the narrative. It starts with storytelling, sharing our perspective. Let's bring other people on as well that can share their perspective. We shouldn't wait on somebody. We shouldn't wait to go on and launch some podcast, invent some stuff. I use a streaming software, and I did this during COVID because I couldn't travel anymore. So I created a show called Island Ford and I stream it live every Wednesday. I started with a phone, streaming live on Facebook, and it slowly grew from there. And that led to us then getting investors. I'll be honest, it worked really well. We're doing the same thing now. Why not leverage this software already paid for, the relationships we have, the experience I have, and say, David, let us partner to have these corridor perspective discussions. Let's get more people on to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. Let's change the perspective of doing business in the Caribbean, doing business in Africa, and why we need to be joined up together. So, David, I want to thank you for last minute saying yes. This is a week ago we said we're going to do this. So, David and I meet every Friday at this time. And I said, when are you going to do it? I said, we're going to do it during our meeting time. It's already blocked in my calendar, right? And I haven't made every single meeting, but it's in my calendar already. I can be where I need to be on Friday. I'm going to do this thing 11 a.m. Eastern. David, do your thing. He's in the UK. David said yes. So first I want to thank you, David, for agreeing to my craziness of, hey, we're going to just do it.
Crazy it is. Because as you can see in my background, I'm in a warehouse.
Yeah, there's nothing, right? There was no, we're going to have to set up and plan analysis, paralysis. It bothers me. Analysis paralysis bothers me. Just do it. Nike, Moratio, just do it. We can improve from there, right? We don't even know how many people are going to see this first one, but the point is we tested it, we learned, we got from there, we had great interaction. We actually got comments on the first one we've ever done. I see that we have 18 viewers right now. For the first one, with no advertising, we put out something on WhatsApp, post on LinkedIn. So you guys who have joined, for the most part, didn't even see something. It's not appointment TV. So guess what? We are going to coordinate doing some more, and we'll eventually get into a regular cadence, just like it would be a TV show or a radio show. But we want to have some guests on here. If you are interested in being a guest, or you have somebody who you think could be a guest, just send us a direct message, David F. Roberts or me, David Mullins, and we'll talk to them and see if we can get them on. Because we want more perspectives. Don't think that we are experts and know it all. No. We are providing a platform. Right, David?
That's right. Absolutely right. And spontaneity is kind of like the essence of success when you think about it as an entrepreneur. You got to be spontaneous.
Yeah,
You need to be nimble, you need to be agile and spontaneous.
exactly. So I'm excited for this. Any closing statements, David, before we wrap up? And I know you and I actually have a meeting coming up now. We're going to a formal meeting with
Yeah,
someone for this, but
that's
this is
right. In,
5 minutes.
in a
I
few
believe
minutes.
this is a serious conversation. The video will be saved on YouTube at Blue Mo Capital's website. It will also be saved on LinkedIn. It's actually on my profile. It will sit on Twitter for a while. I don't think it gets saved on Instagram, where it is also. So if you're on Instagram, you need to go over to youtube.com to end up watching it, but it is saved. And then we'll get clips. David and I will get clips, and we'll be able to post these clips on the various platforms, so you guys get to see and interact. Apologies for the Instagram people who may have been commenting and we can't see the comments. Just to let you know, the platform doesn't pull your comments in, so it's not that we're ignoring you, but it can't pull in your comments. We can pull in comments from LinkedIn, from Twitter, from YouTube, and Facebook. So you guys can harass Instagram about it.
I'm sure I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg would love that.
Oh,
Um,
wait. Well, think about that though. Facebook owns Instagram.
yeah,
We
that's
can
right.
pull in Facebook comments. We can't
Hmm.
pull in Instagram
Can't
comments.
put Instagram. Yeah, well, it's how they organize themselves, man. But look, I have to admit live here that this last minute thing kind of upset my sensibilities as a journalist. We like to plan things, and half the
Yeah,
time we plan things, nothing happens. So
I
so
love it.
that
Well,
takes me out of my comfort zone.
good. And that is my job, guys. And my job is to pull David out of his comfort zone to be on the entrepreneurial side. We're going Richard Branson style, run and gun.
Richard Branson
We
style,
ship.
always.
Here's what I was taught: ship, then test. Ship, then test. If you are happy, this is what Reid Hoffman says. This one of the co-founders of LinkedIn. If you are perfectly happy with what you shipped, it means you shipped too late. If you're not embarrassed by what you ship, you ship too late.
What?
So we have shipped. Now we're going to test and iterate, put it out into the world, get feedback. Too many of us, especially on the tech side of things, you design an app or you want to design the business. What you are designing is what you personally want. You haven't gotten any feedback. You don't even know which color buttons people want, if the font makes sense, if the placement makes sense. But you spend tens of thousands of dollars designing anything that you feel look good, and then you put it out in the world and nobody uses it. What we need to do is beta test. That's why it's called beta testing. Put out a version, let people test it, give you feedback, iterate on that. That's why Windows had version 1.0, then you got version 1.1. Eventually, people like David and I were using Windows 3.1.
Three.
I know we have some people in here we don't know about that, right? Windows 95, Windows 2000.
Yeah.
We iterate, ship, then test. If you go and just research your first iPhone, it could not copy and paste. The first iPhone couldn't copy and paste.
That's
Most of
ancient.
us, most of us would say, "No man, can't work. We not ship that. I'm gonna wait till it's perfect." And Steve Jobs says, "No, no, no. We shipping the thing. We're gonna get it in the hands of people, get feedback, and then iterate." So I forcing that on David now. I'm forcing it onto the rest of you guys. If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your business, the first version of your essay, the first version of your videos, you have shipped too late.
Well, that's the takeaway for this corridor perspective number one. Yeah. David, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to have this, in my view, an enlightening conversation. And as you pointed out, we had some really good feedback and interaction from our audience. I am confident that we will grow going forward. And let's do this again. Let's decide when we do the next one and make sure that we promote it this time,
Oh
throughout
yeah,
our,
no, now
our
that we have this lock in,
yeah.
I can't wait for us to now get this out there. We have content we can go and push. We can try and get in a guest. We'll now figure out what is the approach that we want to take. Is it the two of us going back and forth? Which I love this dialogue. But do we pause and 30 minutes in, you bring in a guest for 15 minutes, you bring in a special guest co-host? We can do so much. So please Guys, you send us feedback. What you want? You want us to have more data like how I showed you that picture of Africa? Tell us what you want us to bring to you. We are here to serve you.
Absolutely. 100%. All right.
All
On
right.
that note, I think from David
One
and
love.
David, we are
David
out.
squared. David
David
squared.
Square.
Out. Later, later, later.